Hi everyone, nice to see you again. So, it's the big day, all the episodes are out and we know the murderer. We're going to be discussing basically the conclusion, so if you haven't watched all the episodes, please go watch them first and then watch this video. A lot of spoilers are going to be coming in this discussion. I've watched the episode twice now again, so I've kind of like made some notes as I've always done, and I want to discuss some of the thoughts that I've had about the episode and just generally the season overall. We can also talk a little bit about the setup for the next mystery for season 3, but I think it's pretty difficult to say anything conclusively just yet. But we have to keep in mind that at the end of season 1, we did already get basically a huge hint at who the murderer would be in season 2, because Poppy and Cinda were already like downstairs when they were being arrested. So that was like a huge red flag already for many of us. But yeah, let's get into the discussion. So, what did I personally think about the ending? I was quite disappointed, unfortunately. Of course, one is always going to be disappointed when their theories are not true. So, you know, take it with a pinch of salt. But I do have big issues on a technical level as well. Yes, I don't like that. I mean, like personally, of course, I don't like that. I didn't even have Poppy pegged as a potential murder suspect. So, you know, you could argue that like I'm just salty, but I don't think a lot of things make sense. So first of all, let's just get like my personal opinion on the matter, and then we're just going to look at some kind of more objective things. So my personal opinion on this is that I don't feel like Poppy feels like the murderer, the kind of person who would be murdering someone else, right? So we're supposed to believe that she's the kind of person who murders another human being who just randomly, basically just randomly chose Bunny because she might get a good podcast out of it for her boss. I feel that you have to be quite psychopathic, quite monstrous, basically, to think that that is quite a, you know, that is okay, that you can just murder a random person just for a podcast for your boss. I think that these kinds of people exist, definitely. They're usually psychopaths, sociopaths, narcissists. I just feel that Poppy really doesn't feel like a believable psychopath. I feel like she's way too submissive. All she does is serves Cinda. She doesn't get any credit. She doesn't get any fulfillment out of it, basically, and yet she continues to do it. So I feel that she's not a believable psychopath, which I think you do have to be able to kill a person just for some podcast views. So that was kind of like my main reason why I didn't think that Poppy would be the killer. But there are also more objective problems and technical issues with Poppy being the killer. So, some questions that I have in no specific order. Specific order is number 1, what really made me so angry that I feel like we had a few things that the killer had to be. So first, she had to be familiar to Lester, so that he wouldn't get suspicious when that person is for some reason coming out alone inside. I guess Lester knew about her because she had been inside a few times to snoop about the different previous the previous murder. But still, I don't know if she's that familiar that Lester wouldn't question her about it. But the major one is that the person has to know about the super secret, very hard to find tunnels. And the show just like gave us a huge middle finger when she just randomly said like, oh, by the way, and I found some tunnels, lol, lol, lol. Like, what? So you just randomly, you've been there for like 20 minutes in the building and you found the super secret tunnels that almost no one knows about, even after living there for many decades? That is just so stupid. I have no idea how anyone was like, yeah, that makes sense. I don't know. That's just like the really hugest issue I have with this. Like, and this is just objectively stupid. Yeah. Okay. So like, yeah, I don't think there's any reasonable reason to believe that she would know about the tunnels. But she just did. Oh, she just found. She's just so smart. Moving on. Second issue. It's just so random. Why did she choose specifically to focus on this Rose Cooper thing and specifically then to kill Bunny? I really don't understand her logic behind that. Let's just randomly kill Bunny because she was sort of mean at some point, I guess, when she went there to talk to the people in the building. No, it's just really difficult to buy. Like, this is a super bad motive for the killing. Like, okay, there's like even Cinda has more of a motive, basically, like to care about the podcast so much that she would want to kill someone. But like for Poppy, what she gets out of this is that her boss has a better podcast and maybe gives her some credit for it, but she never did for the Oklahoma thing. So I don't see how Poppy would believe that she would get any more credit than before. So it doesn't make any sense. Basically, the motive is non-existent, pretty much. And especially why specifically Rose Cooper painting thing, and then why specifically Bunny. Why would she be the person that she randomly sacrifices for a podcast? Like, isn't there any more interesting people that she could have killed? Like, it doesn't have to be like specifically like, I don't like it's even so vague if she even wanted to frame Charles, Mabel, and Oliver, because like on the other hand she sent the message that like get out of the building, but then on the second hand she did like she moved all the things around to frame them, and it's very confusing. Did she try to frame them or not? But like even if just you would argue that like yes, the podcast is more interesting if you frame these guys, wouldn't it be more interesting to like kill someone more interesting instead of a complete random person? Like that would just make more sense for the podcast to make it as popular as possible. Just like kill Amy Schumer, she's in the same building. That's a much more interesting podcast when a celebrity is killed. So yeah, like motive almost non-existent. She shouldn't have known about the tunnels. I also think like, okay, yeah, it was kind of cool that like, yeah, it was kind of made sense for us to first believe that Detective Krebs was interested in and was together with Cinda. But like, oh, shock, it was actually Poppy. Yeah, that kind of makes sense. I can buy that like Krebs is super into Poppy. But why is he so crazy? I have like a time frame issue with. So the show claimed that they had been together for many years, but the Oklahoma podcast is like like max 1 year old, less than that, because it was relevant when the show began. So basically right at the beginning of the mystery. So like I feel like the whole basically season 1 and 2 has to have happened within like half a year or 1 year max. So they can't have been together for that long. I don't know why the show says that Detective Krebs and Poppy have been together for many years. So my issue last episode was that like Krebs wouldn't be so crazy or corrupted that after knowing someone for half a year, they would be okay to cover a murder. But surprise, he actually was. Yeah, he was just like totally on board. Yeah, go ahead and kill this random woman. So apparently Detective Krebs is also a psychopath. I don't know. Again, super missing motive for everyone. Yeah, and then just some smaller technical issues. So the story is that whoever killed Bunny was there at the diner to like kind of like be really annoying about her painting. And Ivan was like, yeah, I don't know, I'm not sure who that was. Sorry, can't help you. But it turns out she's actually a customer who comes there quite often. Like, what? And he, even if she, like, that's at least how I understood it, that she's actually a customer. Poppy is someone who comes to the diner quite often. But even if she isn't, he still didn't recognize her when she was sitting there with the gang. So that's just so confusing. Because when I saw that, I was like, okay, Poppy definitely can't be the killer because Ivan had zero reaction to her being there with the gang. Yeah. And just to reiterate, I really don't understand what her motivation was with the framing. So if she sent the message that get out of the building, did she not want them to be framed? Because if they would have listened and if they had gotten out of the building, they would have definitely never been murder suspects, because no one would have seen them next to the body. So the only reason why Mabel and the others were even like suspects at all was because, well, Mabel literally was above the body. So I would argue, if you send a message that, hey, get out of the building, you don't want those people to be framed for the murder. But then still someone starts to super frame Charles, Oliver, and Mabel for the murder. So like, who did that? Like, it's just conflicting logic, because at first I thought that, like, okay, there has to be a third person who's like one person who just murdered it, then there's Detective Krebs, and then third person who starts framing the trio for this murder. But there's no third person. It's just like Poppy is two people at the same time. I guess maybe she has some other mental disease, because apparently she has like very contradicting opinions if she wants to frame Charles, Oliver, Mabel or not. So yeah, I think that was like a huge mess, and again, didn't make any sense in the show. All right. Oh yeah, and one more thing. Again, I'm gonna have to question how smart Poppy is, because like that's how Detective Krebs framed her, and then that's of course how the show tried to frame her, that she's this criminal mastermind. If she's such a criminal mastermind, why didn't she start to get suspicious when the three were kind of basically laying it on Cinda, and then they said that, like, hey, what about Detective Krebs? And then Cinda was like, oh, how did you know about Detective Krebs? Shouldn't this be a huge red flag for Poppy, who is actually with Detective Krebs, and would assume that Cinda would have no idea about Detective Krebs? So like, why didn't you react to that in any way that Cinda seems to be lying about being together with Detective Krebs? That should have been very suspicious to her, and she should have been like, hey, maybe I should get out of here. This feels weird. And then of course, she well, such a cliche way how she was exposed when she's like, oh, screw that person for getting credit for my murdering. I'm going to say something incriminating. All right. Yeah, I don't know. I feel disappointed that this was the conclusion, because I think the mystery was super interesting. There were a lot of cool hints, a lot of breadcrumbs that led nowhere. And basically, like, I feel like Lucy and Alice and some other people would have been much more logical choices and much more interesting choices. So I think by going with Poppy, they not only are there just so many huge issues, why would she be the murderer? And they just, and she's just the less interesting option overall. Like, it's a good thing if some people look at the hints and then they can, make the correct guess who the murderer is. And that's not an issue for her whodunit. Like, if people are smart enough, they should be able to solve it before the show ends. But I feel like Poppy just came out of the left field. Of course, she immediately was more suspicious after the ninth episode in the end, when it's like Cinda was looking super suspicious. So naturally her assistant was a suspect now as well. But overall, I feel like Poppy just came out of nowhere as a murder suspect, at least personally. And I feel like the show wanted to make Poppy the murderer, so they're like, oh, let's make sure that no one guesses who the murderer is this time, because I guess like Jan was quite obvious, and they wanted maybe to work on that mistake. But I'd rather have the murderer be a bit more obvious, but at least that it would make sense, versus it making no sense. So yeah, for me personally, it was a pity that basically, like, I feel the whole journey was kind of ruined by the really crappy ending. So it was kind of pointless to make these kinds of deductions, who the murderer is and why, because it was just so like they just went with a completely senseless conclusion. So let's talk a bit about the next mystery that they've set up. Basically, we've got Paul Rudd. Yay! Well, he's actually not playing himself this time. Yeah, he apparently has some kind of conflict with Charles, which I don't know, is just really silly that he's the person who has to be the star of the show, but okay, whatever. And yeah, we've jumped 1 year, so there's going to be a lot of information that we're missing that makes sense to the characters in that moment. And I guess there's going to be a lot of like flashbacks in the next season. And yeah, the show just tries to make it look like Charles really hated Ben, and you know, probably the police is going to assume that Charles killed him. So yeah, we're going to see what's going to happen. But yeah, it's interesting. It's different. Now it's not in the building. Now it's with a completely new person who we've never met, or we don't know anything about Ben. I guess we're going to know more about him. Or maybe that was just like a one-time thing that he was showed. I don't know. But I guess like definitely Paul Rudd has to be more on the show. I think it would make zero sense not to show more about information about the victim. So yeah, cool. I guess we're gonna have a cool actor, cool star in the next season. But yeah, I think it's still, I'm like not so disappointed that of course I want to watch season 3 when it comes out. And it's gonna be, again, interesting to continue to look at the mystery, look at what's going to happen, who probably the murderer is, and it's just fun to talk about these things. I just hope that in season 3, whoever the murderer is going to be is going to make more sense. And, you know, I feel personally that a whodunit is much better when someone who looks at like every single detail can already kind of know who the murderer is halfway the show. I think that's when a whodunit is at its best. And I think it is at its worst when the most crucial information comes in the last episode right at the end. And that just makes no sense. And like, yeah, I don't know. Okay, I have to stop ranting about it. But I'm just thinking that like the gang just even solved the whole issue just like this. Just because there happened to be spit from Poppy on the murder weapon. And then Williams was like, hey, that's weird. There's spit from a person who's dead. And yeah, okay, then Mabel figured it out. But like, they would have never figured it out without basically that random thing that just came at the end. So even like the master detectives just figured it out last second by luck. Just like Poppy said. All right, thank you very much for watching. This was really, really cool to make these. This is the third video, but the 2 previous ones as well. I'm really happy that I actually like reached quite a lot of people, and I'm happy that so many people commented and found my ideas interesting. Also shared their own ideas. Actually, I'm sorry, I don't remember who commented, but someone did comment that like, hey, it's Poppy, and she was the one who sent the message through Krebs' phone. And hey, good job, you were 100% right. That's amazing. Yeah, but this was fun. And I'd like to make more of these videos and not necessarily just wait for a year until the new season comes out. So if you have some ideas of some shows that I'm going to talk about, feel free to suggest them in the comments. That would be really cool. If you don't, I might just think of something on my own anyway. Thanks for watching. See ya.